Ironic that a word made up of a color representing purity and a building representing peace and the Holy Spirit still sends chills down our spine. Whitechapel was, of course, the hunting ground of the most notorious and still unknown serial killer ever, Jack the Ripper. Meet new Whitechapel resident and recent immigrant from Ireland, Maggie Odell. She recently leased the room at 3 Miller's Court.
Forgive me if my voice trembles. It is not the dampness of the London night that chills my breast, but something deeper, darker, that has lain its cold hand upon me. You will think me fanciful, no doubt. An Irish girl too newly arrived in this infernal city to distinguish truth from phantasm. But I swear upon my immortal soul that what I'm about to relate is no dream, no vapor of an overwrought brain. It is the truth, and it has driven me near to madness. I speak perhaps less to be believed than to be unburdened, for to carry alone the weight of what I have seen and what I have heard and felt would surely be to sink beneath its suffocating mass as though dragged downward into the very abyss. I had come to London, friendless and unacquainted, not 3 months past from the damp, stony coast of Ireland. Poverty was my master, hunger my companion. In Whitechapel, I was told there was work to be had for those who sought it, though not the kind you want to speak about in drawing rooms or look back fondly with pride. Yet a soul must live, and to live one must abide somewhere, however mean and ill-fitting it may be. It was through chance, or through some darker providence, that I found myself being led by a wary, bedraggled landlord to a room in Miller's Court, a narrow passageway just off Dorset Street in the Spitalfield Rookery of East London. The number upon the door was 13. I paused when I saw the number. "You're not superstitious, are ya?" he says. "I'm Irish," I says to him. "Well, then it won't matter." The day was cold and gray, and the December air heavy with soot and damp. The chamber was larger than any room, a single room I had ever seen in Ireland. It was about 12 by 12. A narrow bed leaned against the wall crookedly, and there were 2 cracked windows looking upon the court. The window by the door had a hole in it, and it was covered with a dirty rag. The air in the room was heavy, like a weight upon my heart. It smelled of mold and, something else, something coppery, spoiled. An engraving hung at the far end that took my breath. It was like a portent. A woman fallen to the floor in utter despair, her head upon the lap of an older woman. "The fisherman's wife," the landlord called it. The room was offered to me at a price so slight, so pitiful, that I, who had nearly nothing, could yet afford it. I asked no questions. I just accepted. Now, I'd heard indeed of the murders that had stained Whitechapel, stained its name like spilled ink across newspaper. Now, I had not known the precise geography, only the names. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. I was new to Whitechapel and unfamiliar with the terrible places now infamous. Oh, ignorance. Ignorance at first was my balm. That night, as I lay down upon the coarse blanket, weary from my journey, I thought only of rest. But sleep is a cruel deceiver. The courtyard, boisterous and lively during the day, was like sunk into silence. When it became dark, it was profound and oppressive. Yet within it, I fancied that I had heard a woman sobbing in the distance, or perhaps a whisper set too close to the ear. I stirred and I sat upright, listened with every nerve strained, but all was still. Only the treading of my heart loud in the hush. At length I sat again into the pillow, though unease pricked at me like 1,000 pens. It was upon the second night that I began to dream. Those dreams, they were no common figments of fancy, but things of substance, of weight, and of a horror so vivid that I would wake drenched as though I had been thrown into the blessed River Shannon. I saw a woman's face, young and fair, light red hair, but pale as wax, and contorted in terror. Her mouth opened as if to shriek, yet no sound emerged, only a gaping silence. Then I realized it wasn't her mouth she opened to me in a scream. It was a great gash in her neck, opened like a mouth to shriek. I awoke with a cry upon my lips and a coldness about my hands as though I had touched the grave. By morning, I had resolved to quit the room. Yet when I ventured to the landlord with trembling words, he regarded me strangely. "There's nowhere else for you, miss," he says. "The others won't let in an Irish girl, not in these parts. Best you stay. It's cheap after all." And his gaze, I thought, lingered too long, as if he knew some secret that I did not. "I suppose," he finally broke his gaze, "since you're Irish after all, that you're a hearty girl, you could find a nice, cozy doorway to sleep in." I remained. Each night thereafter, the dream returned. Sometimes the face was clearer, the hair disheveled and that light auburn, and the eyes wide with entreaty. At times, I felt as though she pressed against me in the bed, her breath hot against my cheek. Though when I started awake, I was alone, but for a darker space in the corner by the door that pulsed ever so slowly. A trick of vision, perhaps, born of fatigue. But can fatigue make the air so cold, so bitter that my very marrow froze? Can imagination cause the boards beneath to creak with stealthily tread, though none be walking? I tell you, it was no dream, no fancy. I found work as a washerwoman, but I began to dread the fall of dusk and the creeping of the shadows upon the floor. By day, I heard whispers among the neighbors that the place was cursed and that no one would stay within it, that others before me had fled screaming into the night. I took it as an attempt to harrow an Irish girl. Yet having nowhere else to go, I was trapped as in a snare. One evening, mark me well, it was the 9th since I'd entered that chamber. I lit a candle and I sat in the chair by the bed, determined not to sleep. The air was rank, fetid, as though the walls breathed corruption. Well after the bells of St. Mary Le Bow rang, the flame quivered, though no wind stirred the room. A single creak upon the wooden floor, and my blood ran to ice. Slowly, I turned my gaze, and there in the wavering light, I saw, God preserve me, a stain upon the boards beside the bed, dark, irregular, spreading as though some hidden vessel poured itself into the wood. And from that vapor came a mist, red as rust, that took a form, a woman's form. The woman from my dreams. Her eyes closed as if asleep. I tried to speak, to pray, but my tongue dried within my mouth. Her eyes popped open, large as saucers and filled with a terror I had never witnessed. Her voice, hollow and cavernous, issued from lips that scarcely moved. He's near. I know not how long I sat paralyzed. The candle guttered, the figure dissolved into shadow, and the room was once more silent. But her words lingered. He's near. Who? Some killer? Some monster that creates such abominations? The thought that this spirit of my dreams could be one of the 5 was so distant and impossible that it didn't cross my mind. Madness, I know you think it. A mind overwrought, tormented by gossip and fear. Perhaps. I know that I wondered. Yet answer me this. Why, on the 13th night, as I lay trembling, did the door creak open though I had bolted it fast? Why did I hear the gurgling, breathy, rattling sound of death, a rasping that set my teeth on edge? Why the unmistakable whisper, warm and moist in my ear? He's close. Oh, I could endure no more. At dawn, I fled the room, the courtyard, the street itself, and I ran until my lungs near burst. I told no one then. Who would believe a destitute Irish girl with eyes wild from terror? Yet I knew that if I lingered, I should not live to tell it. Or worse, that I should live, but not as myself. That some shadow would overtake me, some dark contagion of spirit, and I should become a vessel for the very horror that had slain my ghost. I ran to find Queenie, a new friend of mine who worked at the 10 Bells just off Commercial Street. It was still nearly early enough that I caught her kicking out the last of the bedraggled lushies. "Concern, Maggie," she says when I blustered through the door. "You look like you've seen the devil." I told her what I'd seen, and she asked me where the holy hell I'd been letting my space. When I told her it was 13 Miller's Court, the blood drained from her face like a bath done in the night. "Jesus," says Mary, she says to me. "Maggie girl, that's where Mary was done in." "Mary who?" says I. "Oh, for Christ's sake, Maggie, Mary Kelly, the most recent girl that got kicked by the Ripper. Both she and Dark Annie used to drink here. Mary Kelly used to get her punters right outside our front door. Mary Kelly lived and died at 13 Miller's Court." Even now, as I recount this, I feel the presence of Mary Kelly, as though she leans over my shoulder. Sometimes in glass I glimpse not at my own face, but hers. And sometimes, when the wind is low, and I hear again that voice, thin as a blade, yet sharp as terror itself. "He's here."